I am Madeline, 31 years old, and a certified public accountant who spent my entire life being treated as my family's personal cleanup crew. After I explicitly told my brother no, he still shoved his two young children into a random taxi and sent them to my address while he hopped on a first-class flight to the Maldives. Too bad he had no idea I moved to a secure penthouse months earlier. The person living at my old house made one phone call, unleashing consequences my brother never saw coming. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you ever had to stand up to an entitled relative who took your boundaries as a joke. The air in the executive boardroom was thick with tension as I projected the final audit numbers for a massive corporate merger onto the screen. Handling a $50 million acquisition. My firm put me in charge of finding any financial skeletons. Wearing my sharpest tailored suit, I stood at the long mahogany table completely in my element. I had built my reputation as a financial advisor who never missed a single decimal. Numbers made sense to me. They were logical, predictable, and they never tried to manipulate my reality, which was entirely the opposite of how my family operated. My colleagues were hanging on my every word as I broke down the quarterly revenue streams. I had just reached the crucial part of my presentation when my cell phone, resting face down on the podium, vibrated aggressively. I usually kept my phone on Do Not Disturb during client meetings, but I was waiting for a highly confidential wire transfer confirmation for this exact merger. Assuming it was the bank. I quickly flipped the screen over. It was not the bank. It was a message in my family group chat. The notification preview made my blood run absolutely cold. The message was from my 34-year-old brother Trent. It read, "Kids are in a cab to your place. Our flight takes off at 5 this afternoon. Watch them for 2 weeks." I stared at the bright screen, temporarily losing my train of thought. The corporate executives in the room blurred into the background as pure, unadulterated panic spiked through my chest. Trent was my older brother, the ultimate golden child of our family, a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He and his wife Jada were always chasing some glamorous lifestyle they could barely afford. But this was a new level of delusion even for him. I immediately snatched the phone from the podium, excusing myself to the executives with a tight, practiced smile. I stepped out into the quiet, carpeted hallway and typed a frantic response. "I told you absolutely not last week, Trent. I am in the middle of a massive corporate merger. More importantly, I moved out of that house 3 months ago. Do not send those children there." I hit send and watched the little read receipt pop up almost instantly. He had seen the message. I waited for the typing bubble to appear, expecting him to panic, expecting him to ask for my new address, expecting him to act like a father who just realized he sent his 8-year-old son Leo and 6-year-old daughter Mia to a house occupied by complete strangers. Instead, his status changed to offline. He had turned his phone off. He went entirely dark. He was boarding his flight to a tropical paradise, leaving his own children in a taxicab headed toward an empty driveway. My hands shook as I dialed my mother, Susan. If anyone could reach Trent or Jada before their plane took off, it was her. She answered on the second ring, sounding completely relaxed, likely sipping her afternoon tea in her suburban sunroom. "Mom, you need to call Trent right now," I demanded, my voice echoing slightly in the empty office corridor. "He just put Leo and Mia in a taxi to my old address. I moved into a downtown high-rise 3 months ago. You have to stop that cab." I fully expected my mother to gasp in horror. Any normal grandmother would be terrified knowing her young grandchildren were headed to a house now owned by someone else. Instead, she let out a long, exaggerated sigh of annoyance. "Mine, please stop being so dramatic," she scolded, her tone dripping with that familiar patronizing edge she always reserved just for me. "You are their aunt. Helping your brother out for a couple of weeks will not kill you. He and Jada have been so stressed lately, they desperately need this vacation." I gripped the phone tighter, my nails digging into the plastic case. "Mom, did you hear what I just said? I do not live there anymore. Strangers live there. You did not even give them my new address." Rather than addressing the massive safety risk, my mother doubled down on her lifelong habit of making me the villain. "You know Trent gave you his bedroom when you were 12 years old, so you could have more closet space. she snapped defensively. He has always been so generous to you, and now when he asks for one tiny favor, you are being incredibly petty. Just drive over to the old neighborhood and wait on the porch for the taxi to arrive. It is not rocket science, Madeline. Stop trying to ruin your brother's happiness just because you are jealous of his lifestyle. Before I could explain the sheer insanity of her logic, she hung up the phone. I stood alone in the hallway, realizing my family had truly lost their minds. They abandoned two children and already convinced themselves it was my fault. I took a deep breath, staring at my silent phone, knowing my brother was about to learn a hard lesson about crossing my boundaries. A taxi rumbled through quiet suburban streets, carrying cargo too precious for its stained back seat. 8-year-old Leo sat rigidly upright, his small hand gripping the fingers of his 6-year-old sister Mia. The taxi smelled of stale smoke and strong pine, a scent that made Mia press closer to her brother. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, her knuckles turning white from the strain. The driver kept his eyes on the road, occasionally glancing at the GPS on his dashboard. He had not spoken a single word to them since their father shoved them into the back seat 20 minutes earlier. Leo tried to be brave, swallowing the thick panic in his throat. He remembered the chaos at their house just an hour ago. His mother Jada had been running around searching for sunglasses and complaining about her oversized luggage. His father Trent had practically dragged them down the driveway, shoving a crumpled yellow sticky note into Leo's palm. "Aunt Madeline is waiting at her house," Trent barked, barely looking as he signaled the cab. "Be good, do not cause trouble, and we will see you in 2 weeks." Before Leo could ask why they were not going on the airplane, the door slammed shut. Through the window, Leo watched his parents climb into a black town car heading rapidly toward the airport terminal. The taxi slowed, pulling up to a very familiar-looking house. Leo recognized the brick facade and the large oak tree in the front yard. They had visited Aunt Madeline here for Thanksgiving last year. But something felt wrong. The bright red front door, he remembered, was now painted a deep, serious navy blue. The cheerful flower pots that usually lined the porch were gone, replaced by severe manicured shrubs. The driver put the car in park and turned around. "This is the address on the ticket, kid," he grunted. "Out you go. I have another fare waiting downtown." Leo hesitated, looking at the silent house. There was no car in the driveway, no sign that anyone was waiting for them. "Come on out," the driver insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Leo pushed the heavy door open and helped Mia climb down onto the concrete sidewalk. Before he could even say thank you, the taxi door slammed and the vehicle sped off down the street, leaving them completely alone. Mia started to cry, silent tears tracking down her cheeks as she squeezed her stuffed rabbit. Leo wrapped his arm around her shoulders, staring at the closed navy blue door, holding the crumpled sticky note like a lifeline. Inside that house, Detective Rosa Gomez was attempting to enjoy a very rare, entirely uninterrupted Saturday off. At 45 years old, Rosa had spent 15 years working for the city police department, building a fierce reputation as a no-nonsense investigator who missed absolutely nothing. She had purchased this quiet suburban property exactly 3 months ago from a nervous, fast-talking accountant named Madeline. Rosa bought the house specifically to escape the relentless noise and chaos of the city, craving a sanctuary where she could leave her badge at the door and finally relax. She stood in her newly renovated kitchen, wearing comfortable sweatpants and a worn university t-shirt, waiting for her coffee to brew. The house was blissfully silent. As she reached for her favorite ceramic mug, Rosa caught a flicker of movement through the front bay window. She paused, her sharp eyes immediately darting toward the street. Her decades of police training overrode her desire for a peaceful morning. Standing on the edge of her property, right on the sidewalk, were two small children. They looked entirely out of place, huddled together, glancing nervously at her front door. Rosa frowned, setting her mug down on the granite counter. She took a step closer to the glass, scanning the street in both directions. She looked for a parked minivan, a parent chatting with a neighbor, a rogue soccer ball, anything that would explain why two children under the age of 10 were standing alone on a sidewalk. There was nothing. The street was completely empty. Rosa did not hesitate. The relaxed homeowner vanished instantly, replaced by the seasoned detective. She marched to the entryway, her posture shifting from casual to alert. Out of ingrained habit, she grabbed her leather badge wallet from the entryway console table and slipped it into her pocket before turning the deadbolt. She pulled the heavy navy blue door open and stepped out onto the porch. The crisp morning air hit her face as she looked down at the two children. They flinched slightly when the door opened, taking a synchronized step backward. The boy shoved himself slightly in front of the younger girl, a protective gesture that made Rosa's heart ache just a fraction. Rosa kept her hands visible and relaxed her shoulders to soften her expression. "Hi there," she called out, keeping her voice calm and steady as she walked down the porch steps. "Are you two looking for someone?" The boy looked up at her, his eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. He held up a crumpled yellow sticky note, his hand trembling so badly the paper fluttered. "We are supposed to be at Aunt Madeline's house," he whispered, his voice cracking. Rosa stopped, her eyes dropping to the sticky note, then back to the terrified children. "Madeline does not live here anymore," sweetie Rosa said gently. "Where are your parents? Can I call them for you?" The little girl buried her face in his shoulder. Leo swallowed hard. "They went to the airport," he sobbed, breaking down. "They said they were going on a grown-up vacation." Rosa felt a familiar icy anger settle into her chest. Her detective brain registered the truly staggering magnitude of the whole situation. This was not just a simple misunderstanding today. This was a severe textbook case of criminal child abandonment. Rosa did not waste a single second attempting to play the role of a friendly neighborhood mediator. A civilian might have tried to call the parents, hoping to resolve a simple mix-up. Rosa knew better. She recognized the chilling reality standing on her front walkway. This was a crime scene. She crouched down to eye level with the trembling children, keeping her voice incredibly gentle despite the rage boiling in her veins. "You two are going to be perfectly safe," she promised, offering a reassuring smile. "I am a police detective. My name is Rosa. I am going to make a phone call to get you some help, okay?" Leo nodded, his small arms still wrapped tightly around his little sister. Rosa stood up and pulled her personal cell phone from her pocket. She did not dial the non-emergency community line. She dialed 911. "Dispatch, this is Detective Gomez, badge number 427. She stated, her voice dropping into a crisp, authoritative tone. "I need a patrol unit and a Child Protective Services caseworker dispatched to my personal residence immediately. I have a confirmed 1034. Two minors approximate ages 6 and 8 dropped off by a taxicab with no adult supervision. The parents have allegedly boarded a flight for a vacation. We are looking at second-degree child abandonment." She stayed on the porch with the kids, refusing to bring them inside her house to maintain a clear, uncontaminated chain of custody and protocol. Within 8 minutes, a black and white patrol cruiser turned the corner, its lights flashing silently. Two uniformed officers stepped out, recognizing Rosa immediately. They listened grimly as she relayed the details. Rosa handed the crumpled yellow sticky note to the lead officer, pointing out Madeline's name. The officers gently guided Leo and Mia into the back of the cruiser, promising them a safe ride. At the downtown precinct, the harsh reality of the situation was softened by the practiced care of the juvenile unit. Leo and Mia were placed in a secure, brightly lit family room away from the holding cells. A kindly desk sergeant brought them two heavy fleece blankets, tucking them around their small shoulders. A social worker arrived shortly after, carrying a tray loaded with apple juice boxes, string cheese, and fruit snacks. Mia finally stopped crying as she nibbled on a cracker, while Leo sat rigidly on the vinyl sofa, his eyes darting toward the door, waiting for someone he recognized to walk through it. Rosa arrived at the station right behind the cruiser, stepping behind the main desk to begin tracking down the aunt mentioned on the yellow sticky note. It did not take her long to run the name through the municipal database and find the current contact information for the previous owner of her house. Miles away, high above the city, in a glass-enclosed corporate boardroom, Madeline paced near the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had returned to the merger meeting, but her mind was entirely disconnected from the spreadsheets and valuation models projected on the screen. She kept her phone clutched in her hand, her thumb hovering over the screen, waiting for Trent to realize his catastrophic mistake and call her in a panic. The silence from her brother was deafening. The lead executive was in the middle of asking a complex question about offshore tax liabilities when Madeline's phone finally vibrated. She did not even look at the caller ID before answering. "Trent, what is wrong with you?" she hissed, turning her back to the boardroom table and stepping toward the heavy wooden door. The voice on the other end of the line was deep, unfamiliar, and entirely professional. "Am I speaking with Madeline?" the voice asked. "I am Sergeant Miller with the City Police Department. We are calling regarding a Leo and Mia." Madeline stopped walking. Her blood turned to absolute ice in her veins. All the ambient noise in the room faded into a sharp, high-pitched ringing. "Yes," she breathed, her voice suddenly sounding hollow and distant. "I am their aunt. What happened? Are they hurt?" "They are physically unharmed," Sergeant Miller replied smoothly. "But they were dropped off alone by a taxi at a suburban address. The homeowner, who happens to be an off-duty detective, intercepted them. They are currently safe at the downtown precinct, but we need you to come down here immediately. The charge we are investigating is second-degree child abandonment." Madeline felt the floor tilt beneath her expensive heels. The heavy binder of audit files she had been clutching slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a loud, resounding crash. Papers scattered everywhere across the polished surface. The executive stopped talking, turning to stare at her in stunned silence. Madeline did not apologize. She did not bother to pick up a single piece of paper. She turned around and sprinted out of the boardroom without a single word of explanation. She hit the elevator button repeatedly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The descent to the parking garage felt like an eternity. Second-degree child abandonment. The words echoed in her skull, echoing with the horrifying reality of what Trent and Jada had done. They really left them. They actually got on a plane and left their children on a sidewalk. She ran across the concrete garage, her heels clicking, frantically fumbling for her car keys. She threw herself into the driver's seat of her sedan, her hands shaking so violently she could barely start the ignition. As she peeled out of the parking structure, tearing onto the busy city streets toward the precinct, the shock morphed into a blinding, white-hot fury. She navigated through the heavy downtown traffic, her mind calculating every legal repercussion her brother would soon face. Trent had finally pushed her past the point of no return. Madeline gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning bone white. She utterly refused to let her innocent niece and nephew pay the ultimate price for her entitled brother. This completely selfish decision would permanently destroy his entire life, and she would personally ensure it happened. Madeline slammed her sedan into a visitor parking space right outside the downtown police precinct, not caring that one of her tires rested heavily on the yellow-painted line. She killed the engine and sprinted toward the heavy glass doors, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The precinct lobby was a chaotic blend of ringing telephones, harsh fluorescent lighting, and the low hum of stressed officers navigating their afternoon shifts. Madeline marched straight to the thick plexiglass partition separating the waiting area from the main bullpen. She slapped her palm flat against the counter to get the desk sergeant's immediate attention. "My name is Madeline," she announced, forcing her voice to remain steady, despite the violent trembling in her hands. "Sergeant Miller called me 20 minutes ago regarding my niece and nephew, Leo and Mia. I am here to collect them immediately." The sergeant looked up from his computer monitor, his stern expression softening slightly when he saw her visible distress. He picked up a radio microphone and muttered a quick code. Before he could even direct her to a waiting room, Madeline saw them. Through a large observation window, down the adjacent hallway, she spotted two tiny figures huddled together on a faded vinyl sofa. Leo had his arms wrapped protectively around his little sister, his chin resting gently on her head. Mia was clutching a stuffed rabbit, staring blankly at the sterile wall. The sheer sight of them looking so small and abandoned in a police station broke through the last remaining wall of Madeline's professional composure. A hot, angry tear tracked down her cheek. She wiped it away viciously. She could not afford to fall apart right now. Those children needed a fortress, not a crying woman. She squared her shoulders, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. A heavy security door buzzed loudly and clicked open. A female officer stepped through, gesturing for Madeline to enter the restricted hallway. Madeline walked briskly through the doorway, her eyes completely locked on the family room where her niece and nephew sat waiting. As she approached the doorway, a woman stepped out of the adjacent observation room to intercept her. The woman wore comfortable sweatpants, but carried herself with undeniable commanding authority. A silver police badge hung from a leather chain around her neck. Madeline stopped short, staring at the woman's face. The recognition was instantaneous and mutual. "You are the accountant who sold me the house on Elm Street 3 months ago," Detective Rosa Gomez stated, crossing her arms over her chest. Rosa shook her head in disbelief. "I found those kids standing on my front sidewalk. They were clutching a crumpled sticky note with your name and my home address." Madeline felt a fresh wave of nausea wash over her. "I told him," she whispered, her voice shaking with raw fury. "I told my brother last week that I was unavailable, and I explicitly reminded him today that I moved. He knew I did not live there anymore." Rosa's dark eyes narrowed as she pulled a small notepad from her pocket. The pieces of the puzzle were rapidly snapping together. "My uniform officers just pulled the flight manifests," Rosa explained, flipping a page. "Your brother Trent and his wife Jada boarded an international flight. They cleared security and are currently in the air. The destination is the Maldives. They are flying first class." Madeline closed her eyes, letting the sheer audacity of the crime sink in. Jada, her 33-year-old African-American sister-in-law, was utterly obsessed with projecting a wealthy lifestyle on social media. Jada and Trent had constantly complained about needing a luxury vacation to escape the stress of parenting, but Madeline never imagined they would stoop to literal child abandonment to get it. They dumped their kids in a random taxicab to save money on a babysitter so they could sip expensive champagne over the Indian Ocean. Rosa placed a firm hand on Madeline's shoulder, anchoring her back to reality. "This is an active criminal investigation now," Rosa said quietly. "We are charging them with second-degree child abandonment. But right now we have a more pressing issue regarding the children." A state social worker stepped out of the family room holding a thick clipboard. She looked at Madeline with a sympathetic but serious expression. "Because the biological parents are out of the country and currently under criminal investigation, these children must enter the state foster system immediately unless we can establish an emergency kinship placement," the worker explained. Madeline did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. She reached out and snatched the clipboard directly from the social worker's hands. "Show me exactly where to sign," Madeline demanded, grabbing a pen from the counter. "I am taking them home with me today. They are absolutely not going into the system under any circumstances whatsoever." She rapidly signed her name across 6 different legal documents officially transferring emergency guardianship into her name. With the paperwork finalized, Madeline finally walked into the family room. Leo and Mia jumped off the vinyl sofa and practically tackled her, burying their tear-stained faces into her expensive blazer. "I have got you," Madeline whispered, holding them tightly against her chest. "Nobody is going to leave you ever again." She carried Mia and held Leo's hand as they walked out of the precinct. They drove straight to Madeline's actual residence. She bypassed the old suburban neighborhood, entirely pulling into the highly exclusive, private, gated underground parking garage of a gleaming downtown skyscraper located right in the city center. She led the exhausted children into a private elevator that shot up to the top floor. The steel doors opened directly into a highly secure luxury high-rise penthouse, featuring panoramic views of the city skyline. They were finally safe from the unthinkable neglect of their parents. Madeline locked the deadbolt behind them, vowing silently that Trent would pay dearly for this betrayal. The quiet hum of my penthouse was shattered by the ringing of my phone. The caller ID flashed my father, Richard. I knew why he was calling. Detective Rosa Gomez had reached out to my parents in her investigation. I took a breath and accepted the call. I did not get to say hello before my father's voice exploded. His tone was not filled with the worry of a grandfather whose grandchildren were wandering the streets. Instead, it was dripping with a fiery rage directed entirely at me. "Madeline, what is wrong with you?" Richard bellowed. "The police called your mother and me asking about Trent. They said you filed a formal complaint. Have you lost your mind?" I gripped the marble countertop. I did not file a complaint, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice level. The police intercepted Leo and Mia after Trent abandoned them at my old house. The detective initiated the investigation because Trent committed a crime. He left his children on a sidewalk to go on vacation. That is an exaggeration, and you know it, Richard snapped back. Your mother told me you were being difficult about watching the kids, but involving the authorities is malicious. Trent is a good father. He just made a scheduling error. You need to fix this immediately. March right back into that precinct right now. You will tell those officers this was a simple miscommunication about the drop-off time. Tell them you were supposed to be there but ran late from work. I stared blindly at the city skyline, my stomach churning. My parents were doing exactly what they had done for 3 decades. They demanded I fall on my sword to protect their golden boy from his disastrous actions. You want me to lie to the police, I asked. You want me to commit perjury, risk my CPA license, and face potential jail time just to cover up the fact that Trent abandoned his children? It is not perjury. It is protecting family, Richard argued. You are exaggerating the risk. You are smart, Madeline. You know how to talk to people. Just say there was a mix-up with moving dates. Trent and Jada have been under pressure lately. They needed this trip to the Maldives to reconnect. If you let the police arrest him, it will ruin his career. You cannot be this selfish. A cold clarity washed over my mind. For years I bent backwards to accommodate their delusions. I absorbed their insults and paid for their mistakes. Asking me to break the law to protect a man who endangered 2 children was the final straw. No, I said firmly. The word hung heavy in the air. What do you mean, no? Richard demanded. I mean absolutely not, I shot back. I am not lying to the police. I am not risking my career. Trent made his choice when he threw his kids in a taxi and turned off his phone. Now he lives with the consequences. There was a beat of stunned silence. When Richard spoke again, his voice was stripped of all paternal warmth, replaced by a venomous threat. Listen to me carefully, Madeline. If you let your brother go to jail over a mistake, you are dead to this family. You will be cut off completely. Do you understand me? I did not cry. I did not beg for his approval or try to explain my position again. The little girl who desperately wanted her father to love her as much as he loved Trent was gone forever. I understand perfectly, I replied, my voice steady and resolute. Have a very nice life, Richard. I pressed the red button to end the call, drawing the battle lines that would dictate our lives. I placed the phone on the counter and exhaled a long breath. The silence of the penthouse wrapped around me, but it did not feel lonely. It felt liberating. For the first time in 31 years, I stood my ground without apologizing for my own existence. I walked down the hallway to check on the children. The guest bedroom was a massive suite featuring floor-to-ceiling windows and a plush king-sized bed. Leo and Mia sat on the edge of the mattress, wrapped in thick blankets, watching a cartoon I put on the television. They looked up when I entered, their small faces still marked by the trauma of the afternoon. I sat on the bed, pulling them into a tight, comforting hug. You guys will stay here with me for a while, I told them softly. This is a safe place and nobody will force you to leave. Leo looked up at me, his brown eyes searching my face. Are Mom and Dad coming back to get us? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I would never lie to them, but I needed to protect their fragile hearts from the brutal truth of their parents' neglect. Your mom and dad are going to be away for a bit, I explained carefully. You only need to worry about what kind of pizza we are ordering for dinner tonight and what movies we are going to watch. I am your aunt, and I am the boss of this house. My rules are simple. We eat good food, we stay safe, and we do not worry about adult problems. Mia offered a tiny smile, leaning against my shoulder. As I held them, I knew the war with my family was just beginning. My parents would launch a vicious campaign to force my compliance, and Trent would unleash hell the moment he landed in the Maldives. But sitting in my secure fortress, surrounded by the only 2 family members who deserved my protection, I felt ready for the fight. I had the truth. I had the law on my side, and a professional understanding of exactly how to dismantle their lives piece by piece. I walked into my sleek, modern kitchen, the cool marble floor grounding me after that explosive phone call. The children needed something warm to settle their frayed nerves, so I reached into the pantry for the gourmet hot cocoa mix I kept for rare indulgences. As I measured the rich chocolate powder into a saucepan of milk on the induction stove, the familiar chime of an iPad notification echoed from the kitchen island. I glanced over expecting a work email regarding the merger audit. Instead, the screen illuminated with a social media alert. Jada had just posted a new update to her Instagram story. Against my better judgment, I tapped the notification. The screen transitioned to a glossy, high-definition video, broadcasting from 30,000 feet in the air, using the expensive in-flight wireless internet. Jada and Trent were comfortably settled into plush, oversized first-class seats wrapped in premium airline blankets. The video was a short, looping animation showing them clinking two crystal flutes filled with expensive champagne. Jada leaned into the frame, her flawless makeup catching the overhead reading light, her hair perfectly styled for the long journey. She wore a smug, radiant smile that completely ignored the wreckage she had left behind on the ground. Trent sat beside her looking equally relaxed, raising his glass to the camera with a carefree grin. The text overlaid on the video glowed in an elegant cursive font. It read, "Leaving all the stress behind. Living for us." Below that carefully curated declaration of selfishness sat two hashtags: "Parents deserve a break" and "Maldives bound." I stared at the glowing screen, mesmerized by the sheer magnitude of their vanity. They had not simply gone on a trip, they had orchestrated a highly publicized escape from their own responsibilities. Every pixel of that post screamed narcissism. Jada had applied beauty filters, selected the perfect lighting, and typed out a caption framing their criminal child abandonment as some sort of well-earned wellness retreat. They were actively celebrating their freedom while their offspring sat traumatized in a stranger's house. I watched the champagne glasses clink, the crystal catching the light. The complete lack of remorse was staggering. They were flying across the globe, drinking premium champagne and performing for an audience of digital followers, blissfully unbothered by the trail of destruction they had casually tossed into the back seat of a taxicab. I forced myself to look away from the screen before I threw the expensive device across the room. Turning my attention back to the stove, I poured the steaming hot chocolate into two large ceramic mugs, carefully adding a generous handful of miniature marshmallows to each. Carrying the warm cups down the quiet hallway, I approached the guest bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently, stepping onto the thick carpet. The sheer contrast between the digital fantasy playing out on my kitchen counter and the devastating reality inside this room was enough to break anyone's heart. Leo and Mia were huddled together under the heavy duvet. The television was playing a colorful animated movie, but neither child was watching the screen. Mia was crying softly, her tiny shoulders shaking with each muffled sob. She had pressed her wet face against her brother's chest, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her pale hands. Leo was trying his absolute best to be the brave older brother, softly stroking her hair. But his own eyes were brimming with tears. He refused to let fall. He looked up at me as I entered, and the raw vulnerability in his expression shattered my soul. He looked like a child who had just realized the very people supposed to protect him had casually thrown him away. I set the mugs down on the wooden nightstand and climbed onto the bed, wrapping my arms around both of them. I pulled them close, letting Mia cry against my shoulder. "Shh, it is okay," I whispered, rubbing her back in slow, soothing circles. "You are safe here. Nobody is going to make you leave." Leo leaned in, his rigid posture finally crumbling. "Why did they not want to take us?" he asked, his voice cracking with a pain no 8-year-old should ever have to feel. "Did we do something bad?" The question felt like a physical blow. "No, Leo," I promised fiercely, pulling back just enough to look directly into his tearful eyes. "You did absolutely nothing wrong. Your parents made a terrible, selfish choice, and it has nothing to do with you or Mia. You are both wonderful, perfect children, and they are the ones missing out." I held them tightly as the hot cocoa slowly cooled on the nightstand. Mia eventually exhausted herself, her sobs tapering off into soft, rhythmic breathing as she fell asleep against my chest. Leo fought sleep a little longer, watching the doorway as if still expecting a taxi to magically return and take them home. But eventually, the warmth of the room and the emotional toll of the day pulled him under too. I gently tucked the heavy blankets around them, making sure they were completely secure. Standing over the bed, I watched their chests rise and fall in the dim light of the television. They looked so small, so incredibly fragile. My mind flashed back to the looping video of Trent and Jada clinking their champagne glasses, grinning for their followers, entirely detached from the monumental damage they had inflicted. They thought they had outsmarted everyone. They believed they could dump their responsibilities, board a luxury flight, and force me to clean up their mess without consequence. I walked quietly out of the bedroom, leaving the door cracked open so I could hear them if they woke up. Returning to the kitchen, the iPad screen had finally gone dark. I stood in the silence of my penthouse, feeling a cold, calculating resolve settle deep within my bones. Trent and Jada were going to pay. The harsh ringing of my cell phone sliced through the quiet tension of the kitchen. The bright screen illuminated the marble countertops, displaying my father's name once again. I stared at the vibrating device, knowing perfectly well that Richard was not calling to check on his traumatized grandchildren sleeping just down the hallway. He was calling because Detective Rosa Gomez had undoubtedly followed up on the criminal charges I refused to drop. I swiped the green button and brought the phone to my ear, bracing myself for the inevitable storm. Before I could even utter a single syllable, Richard unleashed a torrent of blind, unhinged fury. His voice echoed so loudly through the receiver that I had to pull the device away from my face. "You arrogant, ungrateful brat!" he bellowed, his breath rattling against the microphone. "The police just contacted our house again. They informed us that the charges are moving forward. I explicitly gave you a direct order to walk back into that precinct and clear your brother's name. I told you to say it was a simple miscommunication. Instead, you chose to be a vindictive monster." I leaned against the kitchen island, letting his rage wash over me without absorbing an ounce of it. "I did not lie to the police, Richard," I replied, my tone flat and devoid of any daughterly affection. "I told them the absolute truth. Trent and Jada abandoned those children on a sidewalk to go drink champagne in the Maldives. They deserve every single legal consequence coming their way." My father let out a sharp, mocking laugh that sent a chill down my spine. "You think you have won, Madeline?" He sneered, his voice dripping with absolute venom. "You think just because you have some fancy corporate job and a nice apartment that you can destroy your own family? Well, you are entirely wrong. I am not going to sit back and watch you ruin Trent over a minor lapse in judgment. I am hiring the most ruthless, expensive defense attorney in this entire city. I am bringing in a legal shark to utterly demolish your ridiculous narrative." I crossed my arms over my chest, staring blankly at the city lights glittering through the penthouse windows. "And exactly how do you plan to afford a high-powered defense attorney?" I asked calmly. "Those lawyers demand massive retainers up front. You and Mom live on a very strict fixed retirement income." "That is none of your business," Richard snapped viciously. "But since you want to play games, I will tell you exactly how I'm going to fund this. I'm going to take out a second mortgage on the house. Your mother and I worked our entire lives to pay off that property, and we own it free and clear. I will pull out every single cent of equity we have, and I will use that money to bury you in court. I am going to sue you for kidnapping my grandchildren. I am going to drag your professional reputation through the mud until you lose your CPA license. You will be left with absolutely nothing when I am finished with you." I stood frozen in the center of my kitchen. The aggressive tirade coming from my father faded into a dull, distant buzz. He kept screaming, detailing exactly how he planned to ruin my life, but I was no longer listening to his threats. My mind, honed by years of rigorous financial auditing and forensic accounting, suddenly slammed on the brakes. My professional instincts flared to life, bright and urgent like a warning siren. Something was fundamentally horribly wrong with his statement. Richard believed he had a paid-off home with hundreds of thousands of dollars in untapped equity. He believed he could simply walk into a bank tomorrow morning and secure a massive line of credit. But I knew my parents' financial reality intimately. 5 years ago, when they first retired, I had personally audited their entire portfolio to help them set up a sustainable budget. I knew every single asset they possessed. More importantly, I knew about the massive financial bailout they had orchestrated for Trent just last year. Trent had lost his previous job and defaulted on 2 luxury vehicles. Richard and Susan had come to me begging for advice on how to save him from bankruptcy. I had explicitly warned them not to touch their home equity. Despite my professional warnings, they had ignored me. I clearly remembered the frantic phone call from my mother, revealing that Trent had convinced them to sign some paperwork to help him consolidate his massive debts. At the time, they claimed it was just a small personal loan they co-signed. But as I stood in my kitchen processing Richard's arrogant threat to pull equity from their house, the puzzle pieces rapidly shifted into a terrifying new configuration. My parents did not have any equity left to pull. If they had actually co-signed the documents Trent pushed on them last year, the bank would have leveraged the house. Trent and Jada lived vastly beyond their means, showcasing a millionaire lifestyle on social media while holding mid-level jobs. The designer clothes, the first-class tickets to the Maldives, the endless luxury dining. It had to be funded somehow. Richard, I interrupted, my voice slicing through his ongoing rant. When exactly did you last check your mortgage statements or pull a credit report? The question stopped him dead in his tracks. What the hell does that have to do with anything? He barked, his confusion briefly overriding his anger. I do not need to check my statements. The house was paid off 10 years ago. I have the original deed in my filing cabinet. You are just trying to change the subject because you know I am going to destroy you. My heart hammered against my ribs, recognizing the devastating truth hiding beneath his foolish confidence. This betrayal uncovered itself completely. I let the silence stretch, allowing my father's anger to fill the dead air between us. Arguing with Richard was a pointless endeavor that would only make him defensive. If I wanted to uncover the actual extent of the financial damage Trent and Jada had inflicted on my parents, I needed unfettered access to their accounts. I needed to become the compliant daughter they demanded I be. I took a deep breath and intentionally softened my voice, stripping away all defiance and replacing it with a tone of quiet surrender. You are right, Dad, I said smoothly, letting a heavy sigh escape my lips. The abrupt change stopped him dead in his tracks. You could practically hear the gears grinding in his head as his rage faltered, immediately replaced by the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had successfully bullied his daughter into submission. What did you just say? Richard asked, his voice dripping with suspicious triumph. I said you are right, I repeated, injecting defeat into my tone. I let my emotions get the better of me today. Seeing Leo and Mia sitting in that police station triggered a panic response. But you are absolutely correct about Trent. He needs top-tier legal representation right now, and if you are going to hire a shark to defend him against these charges, you need to move fast. My father audibly relaxed. Well, I am glad you finally decided to use that expensive brain of yours for the good of this family, he stated arrogantly. Your mother and I will go to the bank Monday morning to initiate the second mortgage. We will have the cash by Wednesday. I shook my head. You cannot wait until Wednesday, I countered, leaning into my professional authority as a certified public accountant. High-profile criminal defense attorneys demand massive retainers upfront before they even look at a case file. If you walk into a premium law firm with nothing but an old dusty paper deed and a promise to secure a loan, they will laugh you out of their lobby. They require immediate proof of liquid assets. You need your financials in perfect order tonight to retain counsel tomorrow morning. There was a moment of hesitant silence. I could hear my mother murmuring in the background. Richard cleared his throat, his arrogant facade slipping a fraction as the logistical reality of hiring elite legal counsel sank in. So what exactly are you suggesting? He asked defensively. I am offering to help the family. I lied effortlessly, staring at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I am a licensed financial advisor. I deal with these exact asset verifications every single day. Let me run a rapid audit on your estate tonight. I can compile an ironclad financial portfolio detailing your exact liquidity, your verified home equity, and your pristine credit history. I will package it all into an official certified dossier. When you walk into that law firm tomorrow, You will slide that dossier across the desk, and they will immediately know you have the financial firepower to fund Trent's defense. The psychological manipulation worked like an absolute charm. My father was a man ruled entirely by his own hubris. The idea of walking into an elite downtown law firm and slapping a certified financial dossier onto a mahogany desk to prove his wealth appealed to every narcissistic tendency he possessed. He wanted to look like a wealthy savior rescuing his golden boy, and I was offering him the exact shiny armor he needed to play the part. "Hang on a second," Richard muttered. I heard the phone being shuffled around before my mother's voice came over the speakerphone. Madeline's Susan chimed in, her tone dripping with toxic sweetness. "I am so incredibly relieved you finally decided to stop this petty feud and act like a proper sister. Your brother needs us right now. We deeply appreciate you volunteering your services to help save him." I gripped the edge of my marble island, my fingernails digging into the cold stone to keep myself from screaming. "It is my job, Mom," I replied coolly. "But if I am going to build this portfolio tonight, I need total access. You need to email me your current online banking login credentials, your investment portfolio passwords, and your property tax PIN numbers. I also need you to forward the most recent PDF statements for your primary checking and savings accounts so I can verify the cash flow." Susan did not hesitate. "Of course, darling," she agreed eagerly, blinded by her desperate need to shield Trent from the consequences of abandoning her grandchildren. "Your father is gathering his files right now. I will email you a master list of all our passwords and portal links within 10 minutes. Just make sure the final report looks professional. We want the lawyers to know exactly who they are dealing with." "Oh, I will make sure everyone knows exactly who they are dealing with," I promised, allowing a razor-sharp edge of truth to bleed into my voice. I hung up the phone and set it down on the island. My heart hammered a steady rhythm against my ribs as I prepared for war. I walked over to my home office and booted up my primary workstation. The glow of the dual monitors illuminated the dark room. Minutes later, my email chimed loudly. The subject line read, "Family Financials." I clicked open the message. My parents, blinded by arrogance and a toxic devotion to their criminal son, had just handed over the keys to their entire financial existence. I downloaded the PDF attachments, opened a secure forensic auditing software, and logged directly into their primary banking portal. They thought they were giving their obedient daughter the tools to save their golden boy. They had no idea. They just handed a loaded gun to a financial sniper, ready to pull the trigger and end their reign of toxic abuse once and for all. I smirked at the screens. The glow of my dual monitors washed over my dark home office, casting sharp shadows against the walls. I cracked my knuckles and leaned into my ergonomic chair. This was my domain. Out in the real world, my family could twist narratives and gaslight me into oblivion. But inside these screens, numbers stripped away all the lies. Numbers never possessed an ego. They never played favorites. They simply told the cold, unvarnished truth. I opened the secure portal for my parents' primary financial institution and carefully keyed in the login credentials my mother had just emailed me. A secondary authentication prompt popped up. I triggered the bypass code sent to my mother's phone, which she forwarded to me seconds later with a text complaining about the inconvenience. I ignored her message and pressed enter. The dashboard loaded, displaying the aggregate summary of Richard and Susan's entire financial existence. My eyes immediately darted to the top right corner, expecting to see the healthy six-figure retirement balance I had personally structured for them 5 years ago. Instead, I blinked, leaning closer to the high-resolution screen. The balance was shockingly low. I clicked into the detailed transaction history for their primary savings account, my heart rate accelerating as my professional instincts took over. I initiated a custom query filtering the data to highlight all outgoing transfers over $1,000 during the past 12 months. The screen populated with a cascading wall of red text. Month after month, large erratic wire transfers had bled the retirement account dry. I traced the destination routing numbers. They did not lead to any of my parents' authorized external accounts. Every single one of those wire transfers had been routed directly into a checking account registered to Trent. My brother had been systematically draining their life savings to fund his luxury lifestyle. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare. I opened a new tab and navigated to the county property records database. Richard had arrogantly boasted about having a house owned free and clear, ready to be leveraged for a second mortgage. I pulled up the public deed history for their suburban address. The original mortgage satisfaction document from 10 years ago was right there exactly as I remembered. But right above it sat a brand new lien registered just 4 months ago. I downloaded the attached public filing and stared at the bold black text. It was a home equity line of credit. The maximum draw limit was $150,000. My breath caught in my throat. I quickly toggled back to the bank portal and pulled up the active credit accounts. There it was. The loan was fully maxed out. $150,000 had been drawn down in rapid aggressive increments over the last 120 days. Every penny was gone. But Richard had just told me on the phone that he planned to go to the bank on Monday to apply for a second mortgage. He genuinely believed his house was entirely unencumbered. If Richard did not know about this massive loan, who authorized it? I cracked open my digital forensics toolkit, a highly specialized software suite I used for corporate fraud investigations. I needed the back-end data. I pulled the digital authorization logs attached to the loan application. In modern banking, physical signatures were rarely used for rapid credit lines. Everything was executed via electronic document signing services. I isolated the final contract and extracted the embedded metadata to find the truth. The audit trail provided a flawless, irrefutable timeline of events. The electronic signature packet had been sent to my father's primary email address. The back-end logs showed the document was opened, reviewed, and electronically signed in a span of 11 minutes. But the IP address attached to that digital signature did not match the static IP address of my parents' suburban home network. I ran a quick geolocation trace on the originating IP address. The signal pinged a luxury apartment complex located right in the trendy arts district of the city. It was the exact luxury building where Trent and Jada currently leased their overpriced unit. I kept digging, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard with practiced precision. I traced the disbursement routing numbers for the massive loan funds. The bank had not mailed a physical check to my parents. The funds had been wired directly to an external joint checking account. I cross-referenced the routing digits with the earlier retirement theft. It was a perfect match. The $150,000 had been funneled straight into Trent and Jada's personal account. They had used that stolen equity to buy the first-class tickets, the designer luggage, and the 5-star resort package in the Maldives. The horrifying reality of the situation hit me with the force of a freight train. My parents did not authorize a second mortgage to save their golden child. Trent and Jada had stolen my father's email password. They had intercepted the sensitive banking documents. They had explicitly and intentionally forged Richard and Susan's electronic signatures to secretly open a $150,000 line of credit against my parents' paid-off home. It was textbook identity theft and massive undeniable wire fraud. Trent and Jada had essentially robbed my parents blind, stripped them of their entire life savings, and secretly mortgaged their only remaining asset to fund a fake, glamorous lifestyle for social media. My parents were completely bankrupt, and they had absolutely no idea. I sat back in my leather chair, the bright glow of the monitors reflecting off my face. Trent actually thought he was a genius. I thought he could abandon his young children, steal his aging parents' livelihood, and force me to clean up his mess without any consequences. But he made one single fatal miscalculation. He left a perfect digital paper trail for a highly motivated certified public accountant with a severe vengeance. The rabbit hole of their financial depravity plunged even deeper than the fraudulent mortgage. I shifted my focus back to my parents' original retirement portfolio, determined to map out the exact timeline of Trent and Jada's systematic looting. Using my forensic auditing software, I isolated the past 12 months of banking activity. The initial unauthorized transfers began small, almost timidly, exactly 1 year ago. $1,000 here, $2,000 there, neatly disguised under generic transaction labels like household maintenance or medical deductibles. My parents, who rarely scrutinized their digital statements, had never noticed the subtle bleed. But within 3 months, the restraint had vanished entirely. Trent and Jada realized they had an invisible, unlimited pipeline to my parents' life savings. The transaction logs mirrored the exact escalation of Jada's insufferable social media presence. I cross-referenced the dates of the massive bank withdrawals with her public Instagram feed. A $5,000 wire transfer cleared precisely 2 days before she posted a highly edited photo of her brand new custom interior luxury SUV. A staggering $10,000 withdrawal directly funded their extravagant 2-week winter ski trip to Aspen, complete with designer snow gear and private helicopter tours. Every single time Jada flaunted her supposedly wealthy lifestyle online, my parents' retirement accounts took a devastating permanent hit. Trent had literally stolen the very money intended to keep his aging mother and father out of poverty, all so his wife could maintain the shallow manufactured aesthetic of a high society influencer. They had treated my parents' 40 years of hard work as their personal piggy bank. The sheer volume of the theft was breathtaking. By the time they decided to book their current escape to the Maldives, the retirement accounts were completely tapped out, holding nothing but maintenance fees and dust. That was exactly why they had to resort to the extreme measure of identity theft to open the home equity line of credit. They had already bled the primary accounts dry and needed fresh capital to keep up the charade. They had consumed my parents' entire livelihood without a single ounce of remorse, choosing to fund their vanity while leaving their own children in a taxicab. The sheer cruelty of their financial gluttony made my chest tight with a cold, unforgiving rage. They had fundamentally destroyed the financial security of the very people who worshipped them, ensuring my parents would face a bleak, impoverished future. I refused to let emotion cloud my judgment. Anger was a powerful fuel, but meticulous documentation was the only weapon that would guarantee their absolute destruction. I cracked open a brand new encrypted master file on my secure local server and began the methodical process of building an airtight prosecution-ready dossier. First, I captured high-resolution screenshots of every single unauthorized wire transfer, pairing each one with the corresponding metadata that proved the funds landed directly in Trent and Jada's joint account. I organized these transactions chronologically, creating a damning visual timeline of their escalating greed. Next, I moved on to the home equity line of credit. I downloaded the forged electronic signature packets, carefully highlighting the fraudulent IP addresses. I ran a secondary geolocation trace to generate a formal report, completely verifying that the signatures originated from Trent's luxury apartment building, not my parents' suburban home. I packaged the digital audit trails, the routing numbers, the application timestamps, and the device identification logs into a single undeniable chain of evidence. There was absolutely no room for alternative explanations. No highly paid defense attorney could argue this was a simple misunderstanding or a shared family expense. It was premeditated, calculated fraud. To ensure the case was entirely bulletproof, I initiated a script to scrape and archive Jada's public social media profiles. I downloaded the high-definition videos, the location-tagged photos, and the boastful captions explicitly tying her documented spending sprees directly to the dates of the stolen funds. Every designer handbag, every expensive dinner, and every beachfront resort stay was logged and cross-referenced against the stolen retirement money. The contrast between her curated digital vanity and the brutal reality of her criminal behavior was perfectly preserved. I placed all of these files into the encrypted master folder. I added a comprehensive executive summary breaking down the complex financial data into clear, easily digestible bullet points that any police detective, federal prosecutor, or stunned parent could immediately understand. I secured the master file behind a military-grade encryption protocol, creating multiple redundant backups on offline physical drives stored safely in my personal fireproof safe. I took extra precautions to password protect the primary flash drive before slipping it securely into my jacket pocket. I locked the system down completely, ensuring that absolutely no one could digitally erase, alter, or tamper with the massive mountain of evidence I had just compiled against them. Trent and Jada truly thought they were entirely untouchable, hiding their crimes behind their meticulously manicured online personas, and my parents' endless blind financial enabling. They genuinely believed they could run away to a tropical island paradise, casually abandoning their two innocent children on a sidewalk, while I was forced to just play the obedient, silent caretaker who always cleaned up their filthy messes. They severely underestimated the analytical wrath of a woman pushed to her absolute unbreakable limit. I leaned back slowly in my ergonomic leather chair, crossing my arms and staring at the locked secure folder sitting right in the exact center of my glowing desktop screen. The elaborate trap was now fully constructed, the digital bait was perfectly set, and the heavy steel cage was completely ready to snap violently shut. All I needed to do right now was hand this devastating weapon over to the proper legal authorities and simply watch my deeply arrogant brother finally face the crushing, inescapable consequences of his own monumental, unforgivable hubris. He had finally crossed the line for the last time, and I would show absolutely no mercy. I picked up my cell phone from the marble kitchen island, the cold metal grounding my thoughts. I did not scream. I did not cry. The time for emotional reactions had passed, replaced by the precision of a professional auditor about to destroy a target. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed the number for Detective Rosa Gomez. She had given me her card at the precinct in case my family attempted to harass me. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp despite the late hour. Gomez speaking, she answered. Rosa, it is Madeline, I said, keeping my tone level. I need you to escalate your investigation immediately. Trent and Jada did not just abandon their children today. They committed massive wire fraud and identity theft against my parents. The line went silent for a heavy beat. I heard paper rustle as Rosa sat up straighter at her desk. Walk me through it, Madeline Rosa instructed, her tone dropping into an investigative cadence. Tell me exactly what you found. I explained everything with the facts of an accountant delivering an executive summary. I detailed the unauthorized wire transfers bleeding my parents' retirement accounts dry over the past 12 months. I outlined the forged electronic signatures used to secure a $150,000 home equity line of credit. I confirmed that the geolocation data and IP addresses for the digital signature packets traced directly back to Trent and Jada luxury apartment, bypassing my parents' suburban network. I told her about the transaction dates matching Jada publicized social media posts, linking stolen funds to their extravagant vacations, luxury cars, and designer purchases. Rosa let out a low whistle. You built a forensic timeline in a few hours, she asked, the astonishment evident in her voice. I have an encrypted master file containing every timestamp, routing number, forged signature packet, and matching social media post, I confirmed. It is bulletproof. No defense attorney can argue their way out of this massive paper trail. Rosa let out a sharp breath. Madeline, if what you are saying is backed by this hard data, the child abandonment charge just became the least of their problems. We are looking at grand larceny, elder financial abuse, and federal wire fraud. Because they used international banking networks to fund their trip to the Maldives, this crosses major jurisdictions. I am bringing the federal authorities into this immediately. I need a secure way to transfer this dossier to your department right now, I told her. The file is heavily encrypted, but I want it in your custody before my parents try to intervene, or Trent realizes what I have done and attempts to scrub his digital footprint. Rosa did not waste time. I am sending a secure law enforcement upload link to your email address right now, she replied. Once you upload the master file, I will print hard copies for the district attorney and forward the digital package to the Federal Financial Crimes Division. We will start drafting the federal arrest warrants tonight. I stayed on the line as the email chimed in my inbox. I clicked the secure portal link, attached the heavily encrypted zip file, and hit upload. A green checkmark flashed across my screen. It is done, I confirmed, watching the progress bar reach 100%. The weapon was officially out of my hands and in the possession of the justice system. Now we plan the next phase, I stated, pacing across the hardwood floor of my home office. Trent and Jada are currently sitting in a 5-star resort in the Maldives. They think they have unlimited access to my parents' stolen equity. We need to cut off their air supply. Rosa chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. You read my mind, Madeline. With this evidence, I can easily petition a judge for an emergency freeze on all associated accounts, pending a criminal investigation. But since you are acting as your parents' fiduciary, you can actually contact the bank fraud department directly and freeze the line of credit from the inside. I smiled at the monitor, my mind already racing 10 steps ahead. I will call the bank fraud division the second we hang up. I will flag the home equity line and all linked credit cards as active crime scenes. They will not be able to buy a single grain of rice on that island. But Rosa, we have to prepare for the fallout. When their cards decline, they are going to panic. They will call my parents, and my parents will inevitably try to bail them out. Rosa agreed instantly. Let your parents try. If the accounts are frozen by the fraud department and flagged by the police, your parents cannot unfreeze them without triggering a federal inquiry. They are completely locked out of their own stolen money. This leaves your brother stranded across the globe with zero assets and active felony warrants waiting for him the second his passport hits American soil. We spent the next 20 minutes coordinating our strategy to ensure there were absolutely no loopholes. Rosa promised to push the warrants through the late-night judicial channels, leveraging the severe child abandonment angle to expedite the federal fraud approvals. I promised to keep Leo and Mia completely insulated in my penthouse, refusing any contact from my parents that might compromise the safety of the children or the integrity of the investigation. As we concluded the call, Rosa paused. You are an incredibly dangerous woman to cross, Madeline. I am glad you are on our side. I thanked her and hung up the phone. The board was set. The pieces were locked into their inevitable positions. I had secured the children, handed over the criminal evidence, and aligned myself with law enforcement. My parents' arrogant demands and my brother's sickening entitlement had finally collided with an immovable object. I turned my attention back to my computer screen, ready to make the final devastating phone call. I locked my eyes on the monitors in my home office as I dialed the emergency fraud hotline for my parents' bank. Given their high-tier accounts, the call bypassed the standard queue and connected directly to an analyst named Gregory. A crisp voice answered, asking for account verification. I did not waste time with pleasantries. My name is Madeline, I stated, my tone sharp and authoritative. I am a licensed, certified public accountant, acting as the authorized financial fiduciary for Richard and Susan. I am reporting an active multi-$100,000 wire fraud and identity theft situation currently being investigated by Detective Rosa Gomez at the Municipal Police Department. I have the preliminary federal case file number ready for your records. The analyst immediately shifted to high alert security protocol. He typed rapidly as I recited the alphanumeric code and provided my parents sensitive security answers. I need you to look at the home equity line of credit opened 4 months ago. I instructed, watching my own screen mirror his data. The digital signatures on that loan were forged. The equity was drained and wired into external accounts without the primary account holder's consent. I need a total freeze on that specific credit line, the primary checking account, and every debit and credit card associated with the external routing numbers. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line as the analyst reviewed the glaring discrepancies in the metadata. He saw the residential IP addresses mismatching the digital signatures. He saw the massive erratic withdrawals bleeding the life savings dry. As a licensed fiduciary reporting an active felony investigation with a verified police file, you have the authority to request a hard lock. The analyst confirmed, his voice grave. I am initiating a level 5 security freeze across the entire portfolio right now. This means absolutely no incoming or outgoing transfers will clear. All physical and digital cards linked to the diverted funds are permanently suspended, effective this very second. The only way to lift this freeze is through an in-person branch visit coordinated with law enforcement. I watched my screen refresh. The status indicators, next to my parents' accounts, and the fraudulent credit lines turned from a healthy green to a blaring red. The bold words "account locked" flashed across the portal. Do not notify the secondary account users, I commanded. Let the cards decline at the point of sale. The analyst agreed. I thanked him and ended the call. Trent and Jada were floating in a bubble of stolen luxury, completely unaware that their oxygen supply had just been violently severed. Halfway across the globe, the sun set over the Indian Ocean. Trent and Jada sat at a private candlelit table on the pristine white sand. Gentle waves lapped near their shoes as a waiter poured vintage champagne. Jada, looking flawless in a custom silk gown, held her smartphone high to capture the lighting. She panned the camera across the table, ensuring her followers could see the imported caviar, the massive grilled lobsters, and the desserts. This exclusive dinner cost $2,000, a price Trent barely blinked at when he reserved it using the stolen equity line. He leaned into the camera frame, flashing a carefree smile, playing the wealthy, devoted husband. He kissed her cheek for the video, detached from the fact that his actual children were currently hiding in a stranger's apartment back in the United States. Jada uploaded the clip to her profile, typing a caption about refusing to settle for less than luxury. She set her phone down as the waiter approached, with the final check presented on a silver tray. Trent pulled a heavy metal credit card from his wallet and tossed it onto the tray. "Keep the change," he boasted loudly. They continued sipping their champagne, wrapped in their fabricated bubble of stolen wealth. 2 minutes later, the waiter returned. His polite, deferential demeanor had shifted into a tight, uncomfortable mask of professional concern. He cleared his throat softly, holding the metal card out toward Trent. "I apologize, sir," the waiter murmured, keeping his voice discreet to avoid disturbing the other wealthy guests nearby. "Your card has been declined." Trent frowned, his arrogant smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. He snatched the card from the waiter's hand, visibly annoyed by the inconvenience. "Run it again." Trent snapped, his tone sharp and dismissive. "The machine must have a bad connection out here on the beach. It is a premium card. There are no limits on it." The waiter shook his head, his posture stiffening. "I ran it 3 times, sir. The system is returning a hard decline code. We cannot process the payment." Jada rolled her eyes, annoyed that the seamless aesthetic of their evening was being interrupted by administrative incompetence. "Just use the other one, Trent." She sighed, taking another sip of champagne. "Tell them to hurry up. I want to go back to our overwater bungalow and relax." Trent pulled his wallet back out, retrieving a secondary platinum card linked directly to the same fraudulently funded checking account. He shoved it toward the waiter, his face flushing with irritation. "Use this one and make it quick," Trent demanded. The waiter nodded and walked swiftly back toward the dining pavilion. Trent grumbled about the terrible service, apologizing to Jada for the minor disruption to their romantic evening. 3 incredibly long minutes passed. The rhythmic sound of the ocean waves suddenly felt slightly more oppressive. The waiter returned, accompanied by the resort's hospitality manager. He carried a wireless payment terminal and a deeply serious expression. "Sir," the manager stated firmly, standing over their candle-lit table. "Every card on your profile is showing a severe fraud lock. We require an immediate alternative form of payment for this meal and your entire remaining hotel balance." Trent felt a cold sweat break across his neck as Jada stared at the manager in stunned silence. The absolute nightmare had officially begun. Jada scoffed loudly, her manicured acrylic nails drumming a sharp, irritated rhythm against the clean white linen tablecloth. "You people clearly do not know how to run a simple transaction." She snapped, her voice carrying over the gentle crash of the ocean waves. She snatched her designer handbag from the empty chair beside her and aggressively dug through the silk interior. She pulled out a heavy metal black card, slamming it directly onto the manager's wireless terminal. "Run this one," Jada commanded with supreme arrogance. "It has absolutely no spending limit. Now process the charge and bring us our dessert. I am tired of this ridiculous incompetence." The hospitality manager did not flinch. He maintained his rigid professional posture and quickly swiped Jada's premium black card through the mobile reader. The machine processed for exactly 2 seconds before emitting a harsh, singular beep. The digital screen flashed a bright, glaring red. "Declined. Fraud lock." The manager slowly turned the screen around so Jada could see the undeniable rejection for herself. "I assure you, ma'am, our systems are functioning perfectly," he stated, his voice stripped of all prior warmth. "Every financial institution associated with your identities has completely frozen your assets." Trent felt the cold sweat on his neck turn into a heavy, suffocating dread. His hands shook as he pulled his phone from his pocket, desperate to prove the manager wrong. He quickly navigated to his primary mobile banking application, his thumb slipping on the glass screen twice before he managed to input his secure passcode. The loading circle spun for a grueling 5 seconds. When the dashboard finally materialized, Trent physically recoiled, the breath completely knocked out of his lungs. His available checking balance read, exactly $0.00. A massive red banner dominated the top screen. It read "Severe Fraud Alert. All assets frozen. Please contact law enforcement." Jada leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening in absolute horror as she read the glaring red text. The carefully constructed illusion of their vast, untouchable wealth instantly evaporated into thin air. "Trent, what is happening?" she hissed, panic entirely replacing her earlier haughtiness. "Where is all of our money?" The manager stepped closer, his stance now distinctly authoritative. "Sir, we require immediate payment for the $2,000 dinner you just consumed, as well as the outstanding balance for your overwater villa. If you cannot provide a valid authorized form of payment right now, I will be forced to contact local authorities to report theft of services. You and your wife need to accompany me to the lobby immediately." Other guests at nearby tables had stopped eating, watching the humiliating spectacle. Trent grabbed Jada's arm, dragging her out of her chair as they followed the manager in absolute disgrace. Back in my secure, quiet penthouse, I poured myself a fresh cup of tea. The silence of the city night was broken only by the sharp, aggressive vibrating of my cell phone resting on the kitchen island. The caller ID flashed Trent's name over and over again. I did not answer a single call. I simply let them ring through to voicemail, watching the notification badge climb from 1 to 3 to 5 missed calls. When the ringing finally stopped, the automated transcription feature on my phone began translating the audio messages into text. I pressed play on the first voicemail, letting my brother's unhinged fury echo through my kitchen. "Madeline, you vindictive witch!" Trent screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking with absolute uncontrollable rage. "I know you did this. You are the only accountant in the family who knows exactly how to lock these accounts. We are sitting in the lobby of a resort being treated like criminals because of you. You better call this bank right now and reverse whatever malicious lock you put on my money. You have 10 minutes to fix this, or I swear I will make you regret the day you were born." I took a calm sip of my tea and tapped the second voicemail. Trent had clearly devolved from commanding to explosive panic. "They are threatening to call the local police, Madeline." He bellowed, the sound of Jada crying audibly in the background. "You cannot leave us stranded in a foreign country without a single dollar to our names. This is completely illegal. You stole my access. I am going to sue you for everything you own. I will drag your precious professional reputation through the mud. I will march into the state accounting board and make sure they revoke your license permanently." The third voicemail was pure venom. Trent no longer sounded like a brother. He sounded like a cornered animal realizing the trap had definitively snapped shut. "You think you are so incredibly smart, Madeline," he snarled, his breath hitting his phone microphone hard. "You think you can play God with our lives because you hold a grudge over some stupid babysitting favor. Mom and Dad are going to disown you forever. When I get back to American soil, I am going to absolutely destroy you. I will take your apartment, your job, and your entire pathetic life. Unfreeze my accounts right now." I deleted the voicemails from my local device and forwarded the audio files directly to a secure cloud server, instantly preserving the digital evidence of his extremely aggressive threats. Trent genuinely believed his intimidation tactics would quickly bully me into full submission. He thought his loud, violent promises of total destruction would force me to cower, call the fraud department, and instantly restore his stolen wealth. He had absolutely no idea that his screaming only validated my entire strategy completely. His empty threats of ruining my career were laughable compared to the massive federal indictments currently being drafted by the Financial Crimes Division. Let him scream. Let him threaten to destroy me. He was shouting from the bottom of a very deep, very dark financial grave, and I was the one holding the shovel. The warm, tropical breeze blowing through the open-air pavilion of the resort abruptly lost all its charm. The hospitality manager, having exhausted his patience with Trent's aggressive shouting and empty promises of unlimited wealth, simply raised his hand and signaled the local resort security. Within moments, two large men in crisp uniforms flanked the candlelit table. They did not care about Jada's custom silk gown or Trent's designer watch. They grabbed Trent by the arm and firmly marched him toward the main reception building. Jada stumbled behind them, her heels sinking awkwardly into the pristine white sand, her face flushed with a terrifying mix of humiliation and sheer panic. When they reached the grand lobby, the situation escalated from an embarrassing inconvenience to a severe legal nightmare. Two local police officers were already waiting by the mahogany reception desk. The manager handed the officers a detailed printout of the unpaid bill, which had ballooned with luxury spa treatments, premium dining, and the lavish overwater bungalow rental. The total was staggering, and the resort wanted their money immediately. The officers demanded their passports. Trent tried to argue, puffing out his chest to intimidate them, but the officers simply unclipped their radios and warned him that theft of services was a serious offense, punishable by immediate incarceration in a local holding facility. They confiscated the passports, flagging them in the international database. Trent and Jada were officially detained. They were forced to sit on a rigid wooden bench in the center of the lobby, while other affluent guests walked past, casting disgusted and pitying glances their way. Their expensive luggage was unceremoniously dumped at their feet by the bellhop staff. Given 1 hour to secure payment before being transported to a foreign jail cell, Trent dialed the only people gullible enough to save him. He called Richard and Susan. Back in the United States, my parents were violently jolted awake by the frantic international call. Trent was hyperventilating, begging his father to wire cash to the resort immediately to keep him out of a foreign prison. Richard, groggy and confused, grabbed his laptop and logged into his secondary checking account, the single meager account that had not yet been completely decimated by my brother's relentless theft. It contained the very last of their accessible liquid cash, the modest safety net meant to cover their monthly groceries and utility bills. Terrified of their golden boy spending the night in a concrete cell, Richard and Susan did not hesitate. They wired the entire remaining balance directly to the resort to settle the exorbitant bill. But settling the hotel invoice left Trent and Jada stranded. They needed flights back to American soil, and my parents had almost nothing left to spend. Scraping together the final remnants of their cash, Susan desperately scoured the internet for the absolute cheapest airfare available. There were no luxury suites, no lie-flat beds, and no priority boarding passes. She booked them the most grueling, punishing itinerary possible just to guarantee they would not be arrested for loitering at the airport. The officers watched with stern expressions as Jada tried to hide her face behind her oversized designer sunglasses, utterly mortified. The pristine illusion she had broadcast to her followers was entirely shattered, replaced by the grim reality of armed escorts and a frantic, humiliating exit from paradise. The local police escorted Trent and Jada directly to the departure terminal, marching them past the duty-free shops and standing by the gate until they physically boarded the aircraft. Their glorious influencer-ready vacation had ended in an abrupt, humiliating deportation. The flight home was a stark, agonizing contrast to their glamorous outbound journey. They were shoved into the absolute last row of a massive commercial airliner, wedged into cramped, unyielding middle seats right next to the noisy lavatories. Jada was still wearing her custom silk gown, now wrinkled, stained with sweat, and smelling faintly of the panic that had consumed their evening. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the harsh fluorescent cabin lights. The itinerary Susan had booked was a 40-hour soul-crushing marathon of misery. It included 3 separate layovers in overcrowded, chaotic international terminals. Every time they landed, they had to drag their heavy, oversized designer suitcases through massive airports because they could not afford the excess baggage checking fees for the connecting budget airlines. During the second agonizing leg of their journey, a toddler seated directly behind Trent began kicking the back of his chair with relentless, rhythmic enthusiasm. Across the narrow aisle, twin babies screamed in harmony, their piercing cries cutting through the thin, cheap headphones Trent had begged from a flight attendant. There was no premium champagne to dull the absolute misery. There were no hot towels or gourmet meals, only tiny bags of stale pretzels and lukewarm water served in flimsy plastic cups. Trent sat rigidly in his narrow seat, his knees pressed painfully against the tray table in front of him. His jaw was locked tight, his teeth grinding together as he stared at the back of the seat ahead. He was boiling in a toxic stew of his own arrogance and blistering anger. He blamed me for every single second of his suffering, completely ignoring the fact that his own criminal greed had engineered this exact nightmare. He stewed in his misery, endlessly fantasizing about bursting into my home and forcing me to hand over the children while demanding an apology. Jada wept quietly beside him, mourning the loss of her digital aesthetic and the total public humiliation they had endured in the resort lobby. She tried to record a video complaining about the terrible airline service, but her phone battery died, leaving her staring at a black empty screen. For 40 excruciating hours, the golden couple was trapped in an airborne prison of their own making, slowly crawling back to a country where a highly coordinated law enforcement trap was patiently waiting to welcome them home. The wheels of the massive commercial airliner hit the tarmac at the international airport with a heavy, jarring thud. Trent and Jada had finally returned to American soil after 40 grueling hours of absolute economy-class torture. They dragged their exhausted, unwashed bodies through the sterile customs line, their premium designer clothes completely ruined and their tempers flaring dangerously hot. As soon as Jada found an available electrical outlet near the crowded baggage claim carousel, she aggressively plugged in her dead smartphone. The bright screen immediately illuminated, flooding her with endless notifications, missed calls from angry resort managers, and confused comments from her social media followers, wondering why her glamorous vacation content had suddenly stopped. Jada stared at her pale reflection in the dark glass screen, her deeply ingrained vanity instantly overriding her sheer physical exhaustion and mounting panic. She refused to let her digital audience know she had been deported like a common criminal. She desperately needed a compelling dramatic narrative to completely rewrite the humiliating truth of their failed trip. She pulled Trent aside, her eyes wide with a manic, desperate energy. "We are going to spin this disaster," Jida hissed, gripping his arm tightly as passengers bumped past them. "We cannot let anyone find out about the frozen credit cards or the eviction from the resort. We need a massive distraction, something incredible that makes us look like the absolute victims here." Trent scrubbed a shaking hand over his unshaven face, his own toxic resentment toward me boiling over. "I am going to make Madeline pay for every single second of this miserable flight home," he snarled. "She stole my kids and locked my bank accounts." Jada nodded eagerly, rapidly formulating a highly toxic, calculated plan. "Exactly," she agreed, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "She kidnapped our children while we were on a brief romantic anniversary getaway. We were forced to abandon our beautiful trip and fly back immediately because my crazy, unhinged sister-in-law held our babies hostage. We are going to go straight to her suburban house right now. I will start a high-definition live stream the very second we pull into her driveway. I want thousands of people watching this happen live." Trent quickly caught on to the malicious strategy, a cruel, vindictive smile stretching across his exhausted face. "We will kick her front door straight off its hinges," he declared, his arrogance fully restored by the prospect of violence and public validation. "We will storm right into her living room, bypass her ridiculous security, snatch Leo and Mia, and get the entire heroic rescue mission on camera. The internet will completely tear her apart. They will ruin her accounting business for us." They aggressively grabbed their heavy suitcases off the metal carousel, ignoring the exhausted travelers around them, entirely fueled by a shared dangerous delusion of viral sympathy and unearned internet fame. They were absolutely convinced they were about to execute a flawless, heroic ambush at my old brick house on Elm Street, completely unaware that their target had not lived at that suburban address for months. Miles away, sitting comfortably in my hyper-secure luxury high-rise penthouse, I was already 3 strategic steps ahead of their pathetic scheme. I poured myself a fresh hot cup of warm herbal tea, the smooth ceramic mug soothing my hands as I stared out at the sprawling illuminated city skyline. My entire professional career was built on accurately predicting human behavior based on hard data, and Trent and Jada were the most predictable liabilities I had ever audited. I knew their psychological profiles intimately. They were severe textbook narcissists who thrived on public spectacle. They would never quietly accept defeat or contact the authorities to mediate a civilized civil dispute. They would demand a massive audience, and they would crave a highly dramatic, violent confrontation to mask their own criminal inadequacies. I picked up my phone and checked my encrypted messaging application. Detective Rosa Gomez had just sent a brief, automated flight tracking update. The commercial airliner carrying my brother and sister-in-law had successfully landed at the international airport exactly 45 minutes ago. The digital trap I had spent the last 2 days meticulously constructing was finally ready to be violently sprung. I walked across the hardwood floor to the guest bedroom, gently pushing the heavy oak door open to check on Leo and Mia. The two children were peacefully occupied and perfectly content in the soundproof media room, completely engrossed in a colorful animated movie playing on the massive flat-screen television. They were entirely insulated from the impending chaos, safe behind layers of reinforced steel and 24-hour building security. I walked back to the kitchen island and set my mug down next to my cell phone. I knew Trent would not call me directly. I was far too cowardly to face me without a captive audience or an overwhelming physical advantage. Instead, he would inevitably weaponize our parents, using Richard and Susan to run interference, while he and Jada prepared their ridiculous social media ambush. I fully anticipated they would head straight for the old suburban neighborhood, ready to shatter a front door that actually belonged to a seasoned, fully armed police detective. But I did not want them bothering Rosa at her private residence again. I wanted them right here, stepping directly into the center of my controlled environment, where I held every single tactical advantage. I needed to manually redirect their aggressive, destructive path. I stared at the blank screen of my phone, silently counting down the minutes, until my mother inevitably called to demand my total surrender. I carefully and mentally rehearsed the exact, precise phrase I would use to seamlessly lure them away from the old house and pull them straight up to my secure penthouse door. They desperately wanted a captive audience for their fabricated victimhood, and I was going to happily give them the most spectacular, unforgettable performance of their entire miserable lives. I just had to sit back, watch the skyline, and wait patiently for the phone to finally ring. The sharp ringing of my cell phone shattered the quiet anticipation filling my kitchen. The digital caller identification displayed my mother's full name, blinking brightly against the dark marble countertop. I let it ring 3 distinct times, deliberately controlling the rhythm of the engagement, before calmly swiping the green accept button to answer. I did not offer a polite greeting. I simply held the device to my ear and waited for her to speak. Susan did not disappoint. Her voice came through the speaker, pitched high with frantic defensive energy. "Madeline, you need to listen to me very carefully," she demanded, her tone vibrating with a toxic mix of panic and authority. "Trent and Jada just landed. They are absolutely furious with you, and frankly, so am I. You have completely ruined their well-deserved getaway with your malicious stunts." I kept my breathing perfectly steady, gazing out at the illuminated skyscrapers. "Is that so?" I replied flatly. Susan scoffed, the sound harsh and grating. "Do not play dumb with me," she snapped. "Trent just called us from the airport baggage claim. He is absolutely livid about whatever banking error you caused to humiliate them. He and Jada are driving straight to your house right now, and they are not looking for a polite conversation. You need to gather Leo and Mia, pack their bags, and wait on your front porch. Just hand the kids over immediately and apologize. If you make them knock, Trent is going to kick your front door straight off the hinges." Jada has her camera ready to broadcast the entire thing live to her followers. They are going to show everyone what a crazy kidnapping sister you actually are. Do not make a scene at the house, Madeline. Just surrender and take the punishment you deserve. I smiled into the darkness of my apartment. Susan, in her desperate rush to bully me into submission, had just handed me their entire tactical playbook. She had explicitly confirmed their aggressive intentions, their planned physical breach, and their premeditated social media broadcast. They wanted a chaotic, violent spectacle to distract from their own massive financial crimes. They wanted to play the terrified, victimized parents, rescuing their children from an unhinged relative. They were rushing headlong into a battle they thought they controlled, armed with nothing but sheer arrogance and a smartphone camera. "Mom, I cannot wait on the front porch of that house," I stated, injecting a measured dose of vulnerability into my voice to mask the lethal trap I was laying. "Why not?" Susan shrieked, entirely missing the subtle shift in my tone. "Are you trying to hold those children hostage? I told you Trent is not playing around. He will tear that house apart to get to his kids. You cannot hide from him in the suburbs." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my herbal tea, savoring the absolute perfection of this exact moment. "I am not hiding in the suburbs, Mom," I corrected her gently, my voice dropping into a smooth, icy calm. "I sold that suburban property 3 months ago. The person living there right now is the police detective handling Trent's criminal case. If he kicks down that specific door, he will be assaulting a law enforcement officer in her own home." Dead silence fell over the phone line. I could practically hear the gears grinding in my mother's head as the horrific reality of the situation stalled her frantic bullying. "You moved," she finally gasped, her voice completely stripped of its previous aggressive authority. "Where do you live? Where are my grandchildren?" I set my ceramic mug down on the island. "I live downtown now," I answered pleasantly. "Tell Trent to redirect his ride. I am at the Azure Tower penthouse suite number 42. It is the highly secure building right across from the financial district. You can assure Trent and Jada that they do not need to kick anything down to see me. Tell them to come straight up. My door is always open for family." Susan disconnected the call without another word, rushing to relay the new coordinates to her golden boy. I placed the phone back on the counter, a profound sense of satisfaction settling deep into my chest. The digital bait was taken. The predators were officially rerouted directly into the heart of my fortified domain. I immediately walked over to the digital intercom mounted on the wall and pressed the button to connect with the lobby security desk. A crisp voice answered instantly. "Yes, Miss Madeline," the night concierge responded. "I have some highly anticipated guests arriving shortly," I instructed clearly. "A man and a woman likely looking extremely agitated. They might be recording with a cell phone. Do not stop them at the security desk. Do not ask for their identification or try to calm them down. Simply grant them immediate access to the private express elevator and send them straight up to my penthouse floor." The concierge confirmed the unusual instructions without question, knowing my strict preferences for privacy and control. I turned away from the intercom and began preparing the stage for the final act of their spectacular downfall. I moved through the expansive living room, adjusting the soft overhead lighting to ensure absolute visual clarity. I activated the integrated smart home security cameras, hidden discreetly in the corners of the ceiling, verifying that every single angle of the entryway and the main sitting area was actively recording in high-definition audio and video. If Jada wanted to broadcast a live performance for the internet, I was going to capture my own pristine, unedited version of their absolute destruction. I carefully arranged the velvet cushions on my sofa, smoothed the invisible wrinkles from my tailored trousers, and sat down with perfect posture. The luxurious stage was flawlessly set for this monumental impending confrontation. The eager audience of one was entirely ready to observe the chaos unfold. Now I simply had to sit quietly. Now I simply had to sit quietly. But my protective instincts kicked in. The last thing I wanted was for Leo and Mia to witness the ugly confrontation hurtling toward my front door. I walked briskly down the corridor to the guest suite. The 40 hours since Trent and Jada abandoned them gave the children a chance to decompress, but their emotional state remained fragile. I opened the door to find them sitting cross-legged on the plush carpet building a tower out of wooden blocks I ordered yesterday. Leo looked up, his brow furrowing as he read my serious expression. "Is something wrong?" he asked, moving a fraction closer to his little sister. I forced a bright smile, pushing the impending criminal showdown out of my mind. "Nothing is wrong at all," I promised cheerfully. "I just realized we have not initiated the ultimate movie night protocol yet. I need you two to grab your blankets and follow me. I have a cinematic emergency requiring your immediate attention." Mia giggled, grabbing her stuffed rabbit and fluffy fleece blanket. I guided them down the opposite end of the penthouse, far away from the main entryway. I pushed open the reinforced acoustic doors of my custom media room. The space was an absolute fortress of soundproof engineering designed to block out the harsh noises of the downtown city streets. Right now, its acoustic dampening properties would serve a much more vital purpose. I settled them into the massive leather recliners and handed them bowls filled with warm popcorn and gummy candies. I queued up their favorite animated feature on the wall-sized projection screen and cranked the surround sound volume to a deeply immersive level. Once the heavy doors seal shut, you will not hear a single sound from the rest of the house, I explained, kissing their foreheads. Do not come out until the movie is completely over. I will be right down the hall if you need me. I pulled the massive acoustic doors shut, listening to the solid thud of the magnetic locks engaging. The children were now entirely insulated from the violent hurricane about to breach my home. With the innocent bystanders safely secured, I dialed Detective Rosa Gomez. We had anticipated this maneuver from Trent, and Rosa requested I call her the second my parents confirmed his arrival. Rosa answered on the first ring, the background noise of a busy police precinct echoing through the speaker. They landed, I stated bluntly. Susan just confirmed they are currently en route to my downtown address. They plan to kick the door down and live stream a fabricated rescue mission. Rosa let out a dark laugh. Your brother really is a special kind of stupid, she remarked. I have the federal arrest warrants fully signed and stamped by the judge. I am walking to my cruiser right now. I am bringing Brenda along, the senior caseworker from Child Protective Services. We will be at your building in 10 minutes. Make sure your concierge gives us bypass access. I hung up the phone and walked back to the kitchen, grabbing 2 additional ceramic mugs from the glass cabinets. I poured the freshly brewed herbal tea, the aromatic steam rising into the cool air. Exactly 10 minutes later, a soft chime alerted me from the vestibule. I authorized the entry and the steel doors slid open. Detective Rosa Gomez stepped into my foyer wearing a dark tactical jacket over her plain clothes, her gold badge hanging prominently from a thick chain around her neck. Beside her stood Brenda, a sharp-eyed woman carrying a thick manila folder containing the emergency guardianship paperwork and the formal child endangerment charges. I handed them the warm ceramic mugs. Welcome to my home, I said, gesturing toward the living room. The targets should be arriving shortly. I instructed the night concierge to let them straight up the private elevator without any security friction. I want them to feel completely empowered right up until the very last second. Rosa took a sip of the tea, her dark eyes scanning the open layout of the penthouse. This setup is perfect, Madeline, she noted, walking toward the gourmet kitchen, sitting adjacent to the main living area. Brenda and I will position ourselves right here behind this massive marble island. From the entryway, Trent and Jada will not be able to see us until they are fully inside the apartment and the elevator doors close behind them. You just sit on that sofa and let them start their little internet show. When the time is right, we will step out and shut the entire circus down permanently. Rosa and Brenda moved silently into the shadows of the expansive kitchen, blending perfectly into the background. I walked over to the velvet sofa and sat down, smoothing the fabric of my trousers one final time. The massive digital clock on the wall glowed brightly, marking the passage of each agonizingly slow minute. The penthouse was incredibly silent, amplifying the steady beating of my own heart. I picked up my tablet, pulling up the live security feed from the building lobby. On the glowing screen, I watched Trent and Jada storm through the revolving glass doors, their faces twisted with arrogant rage. Jada already had her smartphone held high, the recording light blinking ominously as she narrated her fabricated tragedy to the internet. They marched directly past the concierge desk without stopping, stepping straight into the private express elevator, just as I had meticulously planned. The digital indicator panel above my foyer entryway suddenly illuminated with a bright crimson light. The numbers began to climb rapidly. 10, 20, 30, 40. The low hum of the elevator shaft vibrated through the floorboards beneath my feet. The heavy steel cables whirred with finality. I took a deep, steadying breath, keeping my eyes locked on the polished metal doors. The indicator flashed 42. A sharp, melodic chime echoed through the grand entryway. The trap was sprung. The final trap was successfully sprung. The heavy polished steel doors of the private elevator slid apart with a soft hiss, revealing the dimly lit vestibule separating my main living area from the central shaft. For a fraction of a second, absolute silence hung in the air. Then the heavy double wooden doors of my entryway shuddered violently. Trent did not knock. He did not ring the bell. He kicked the reinforced oak door with every ounce of furious, exhausted energy he possessed. The heavy wood groaned against the deadbolt, but my security system was built to withstand far worse than an arrogant man throwing a temper tantrum. Frustrated by his sudden inability to smash his way inside, Trent grabbed the brass handle and rattled it aggressively. I had intentionally left the secondary latch unlocked, wanting him to enter freely and completely to seal his own miserable fate. The door swung open so fast it slammed against the drywall, the sound cracking through my quiet apartment like a gunshot. Madeline, Trent bellowed, his voice raw and echoing against the high ceilings of my living room. Where are they hiding? Where are my stolen kids? He stormed over the threshold, moving like a hurricane of pure, unadulterated entitlement. I sat perfectly still on my emerald velvet sofa, my posture impeccably straight, resting my ceramic mug on my knee. I watched him storm into my sanctuary, taking in his physical appearance. The golden boy of our family looked completely wrecked. The 40-hour economy flight had stripped away every single ounce of his carefully curated, wealthy aesthetic. His designer shirt was wrinkled and stained with spilled coffee. Dark bags hung under his bloodshot eyes, and a shadow of stubble covered his jawline. He was sweating profusely, panting heavily with a toxic mixture of jet lag and manic adrenaline. He stomped onto my expensive Persian rug, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. "You vindictive thief!" Trent screamed, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "You think you can steal my children and lock my bank accounts? You think you can play games with my life? Where are Leo and Mia? Hand them over right this second before I tear this entire apartment apart looking for them." His chest heaved as he stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. The veins in his neck were bulging dangerously. For my entire life, this exact performance had always worked on our parents. Whenever Trent yelled, whenever he threw a fit, Richard and Susan would immediately rush to placate him, handing over whatever he demanded just to keep the peace. He fully expected me to cower, to apologize, and to reverse the financial freeze I had initiated. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I raised my ceramic mug to my lips and took a slow, deliberate sip of my herbal tea. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to stand awkwardly in my pristine living room, completely disarmed by my absolute lack of fear. The stark contrast between his sweaty chaos and my calculated stillness seemed to infuriate him even more. "I am talking to you, Madeline," he roared, taking another step forward, his shoes leaving dirty smudges on my immaculate rug. His inability to control his temper was genuinely pathetic. Before Trent could unleash another volley of empty threats, a second frantic figure pushed aggressively past his shoulders through the open entryway. It was finally time for the primary co-star of this ridiculous production to make her highly anticipated, deeply embarrassing public debut. Jada stumbled into the foyer looking equally wrecked as her enraged husband, but entirely committed to her digital performance. She held her smartphone high, the bright recording light perfectly illuminating her tear-stained face. She had clearly spent the elevator ride forcefully rubbing her eyes to make them red and puffy, manufacturing the perfect visual of a distressed, victimized mother. She was broadcasting live, pipping this entire psychotic home invasion directly to her followers in real time. "Look at her!" Jada sobbed into the camera lens, her voice trembling with fake theatrical emotion. "We are finally here right now, you guys. We had to fly all the way back from our anniversary trip because my crazy sister-in-law broke into our house and took our children. Give me back my babies, you kidnapper." She aimed the camera directly at me, zooming in on my relaxed posture. Jada gasped dramatically for her online audience, wiping away imaginary tears with her free hand. "She is just sitting there. She stole my innocent kids, and she is just sitting there drinking tea like a complete psychopath. Please, Madeline, I am begging you as a mother. Where are you hiding them?" The performance was Oscar-worthy in its sheer delusion. She genuinely believed her followers would mobilize into a sympathetic mob, completely unaware that I had emergency guardianship paperwork sitting safely on the kitchen island behind her. I watched her pan the camera around my luxurious penthouse, her eyes widening slightly as she took in the expensive decor and the panoramic city views. Even in the exact middle of her fabricated crisis, her petty jealousy over my upgraded lifestyle was plainly visible to everyone watching. I remained entirely silent, taking another measured sip of my warm tea. My absolute silence forced Jada to keep talking, to keep filling the dead air with her own incriminating lies. She was verbally confirming her intent to harass me, cementing her false kidnapping claims, and broadcasting her uninvited breach of my private home. She was literally handing the prosecution a pristine confession tape, beautifully packaged, and conveniently live-streamed directly for the local authorities. Every single second, she kept that camera rolling. She was unknowingly digging her own federal grave deeper and deeper into the dirt. Just let her film. Let her cry. The entire internet was eagerly watching, and they were about to get the show of a lifetime. Jada took another aggressive step forward, shoving her smartphone so close to my face that the bright ring light momentarily blinded me. Her fake sobbing grew louder entirely for the benefit of the thousands of viewers she had managed to gather on her live broadcast. "Are you not going to say anything?" she demanded, her voice cracking with manufactured grief. "You steal my babies from their loving home, ruin our peaceful anniversary trip, and you just sit there. Answer me, Madeline." Trent stepped up right beside her, his fists balled so tightly his knuckles were stark white. He loomed over my velvet sofa, trying to cast an intimidating shadow over me. "You must tell us what room you locked them in right now, or I am tearing down every door in this apartment," he threatened, his voice dropping into a guttural growl. From the deep shadows of the expansive, darkened kitchen, located directly behind them, a calm, deeply authoritative voice suddenly sliced through the heavy tension of the penthouse. "I highly recommend you do not even think about touching a single door in this private residence," Detective Rosa Gomez announced with absolute conviction. The sudden, entirely unexpected sound of a stranger's voice caused both Trent and Jada to freeze completely in their tracks. They quickly spun around in unison, their aggressive posturing instantly faltering as they finally noticed the two women stepping out from the kitchen area into the bright light. Rosa walked forward with slow, deliberate, heavy steps, her posture radiating absolute authority. Brenda, the senior caseworker from Child Protective Services, walked right beside her, holding the thick manila folder tightly against her chest. Jada kept the camera rolling, her brain clearly struggling to process the sudden shift in the narrative. "Who are you?" Jada stammered, her fake tears instantly vanishing, replaced by genuine, unadulterated confusion. "Did Madeline hire private security to keep us away from our own children?" Rosa did not answer immediately. She walked directly into the bright glare of Jada's smartphone light. With a swift, practiced motion, Rosa reached into her tactical jacket and pulled out her gold shield. She held the shiny metal badge up high, positioning it perfectly so it filled the entire frame of the live broadcast. She made absolutely sure every single person watching at home got a crystal clear view of her official law enforcement credentials. "I am Detective Rosa Gomez, with the Municipal Police Department," Rosa stated loudly, her voice booming across the spacious living room and echoing directly into the microphone of the phone. The color instantly drained from Jada's face. The smug, entitled expression she had worn since she kicked open my front door melted into a mask of pure, paralyzing terror. She instinctively lowered the phone a few inches, but Rosa stepped closer, refusing to let her hide. "Keep that camera pointing right at me," Rosa ordered sharply. "Your followers deserve to hear the absolute truth about why you really had to end your luxury vacation early." Trent stumbled backward, hitting the edge of my marble coffee table. He looked wildly between me and the detective, the reality of his situation finally piercing through his thick layer of arrogance. "Officer, there has been a massive misunderstanding," Trent stammered, raising his hands in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "My sister is crazy. She set us up. We just came here to get our kids back." Rosa shook her head, her expression turning into a mask of cold, hard justice. "There is no misunderstanding, Trent," she replied firmly. You did not come here to rescue anyone. You came here because your stolen money ran out. Rosa turned her attention directly to the glowing lens of the smartphone, speaking to the massive digital audience Jada had so desperately wanted to assemble. Trent and Jada, you are both formally under arrest, Rosa announced, enunciating every single syllable with devastating clarity. You are being charged with second-degree child abandonment for leaving your two young children on a sidewalk alone while you boarded an international flight. Jada gasped loudly, her hand shaking so violently that the live video feed blurred. But Rosa was not finished. The detective took another step forward, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from her tactical belt. Furthermore, Rosa continued, her voice completely unyielding. You are both facing federal indictments for massive wire fraud, grand larceny, and felony identity theft. We have the complete forensic evidence proving you forged electronic signatures to steal your parents' life savings and illegally empty the equity from their home to fund your lavish lifestyle. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, broken only by the sharp, terrifying metallic click of the handcuffs unlocking. Trent completely broke down. His knees gave out and he collapsed heavily onto the Persian rug, sobbing uncontrollably. He threw his hands over his face, realizing his entire life was instantly over. Jada stood completely frozen, staring at the camera screen. The live chat on her broadcast was moving so fast it was a blur of text. Thousands had just watched her massive, unforgivable web of lies unravel in real time. They heard the police detective confirm she abandoned her children and robbed her elderly parents. Her entire influencer career, her carefully curated image, and her freedom were entirely destroyed in less than 60 seconds. Brenda stepped forward, opening the manila folder. I am from Child Protective Services, Brenda stated clearly. Your children are currently in the legal protective custody of their Aunt Madeline. You have lost all parental rights pending your criminal trials. Rosa grabbed Jada's wrist forcefully, twisting her arm behind her back. The heavy steel cuff clamped down over her wrist with a loud, satisfying snap. Drop the phone, Rosa ordered. Jada opened her trembling fingers. The expensive smartphone slipped from her grasp, tumbling through the air and hitting the hard floor face down. The screen shattered upon impact, instantly terminating the live broadcast and plunging her online audience into total darkness. The shattered glass of the smartphone screen scattered across the polished hardwood floor, catching the bright overhead lights. Jada let out a pathetic whimper as Rosa secured the heavy steel cuffs around her wrists, neutralizing the aggressive threat she posed moments before. Trent remained curled on my Persian rug, weeping loudly into his hands, defeated by the crushing reality of federal indictments. The chaotic scene was contained, but the dramatic climax was missing its final two cast members. I did not wait long. The elevator indicator chimed, signaling the arrival of the backup Trent had summoned. The heavy steel doors slid open, and my parents, Richard and Susan, sprinted into my entryway. They had rushed across town to ensure their golden boy bullied me into submission, expecting a scene where I was apologizing. Instead, they stopped dead in their tracks, staring in paralyzed horror at their perfect son and daughter-in-law kneeling in police custody. Susan broke the stunned silence. She let out a piercing shriek, dropping her designer handbag onto the floor. "Trent, my baby, what are they doing to you?" she cried, rushing forward. Rosa stepped into her path, holding up a commanding hand to stop her. "Ma'am, you need to step back right now," Rosa ordered, projecting absolute authority. "This is an active crime scene and these individuals are under federal arrest. If you interfere, you will be placed in handcuffs as well." Richard stepped up beside his wife, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. His trademark arrogance, the toxic hubris passed down to Trent, flared to life. "You unhand my son this instant," Richard bellowed, pointing an accusing finger directly at the detective. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am hiring the most ruthless defense attorneys in this city. You are making a massive mistake." He turned his furious gaze toward me, sitting calmly on my velvet sofa. "Madeline, you vindictive monster. I told you to drop the charges. I told you I was taking out a second mortgage to destroy you in court, and you pull this stunt. I demand you call this off right now. You are tearing this family apart over a simple mistake." I slowly placed my ceramic mug down on the marble end table. I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my trousers, feeling no fear, guilt, or sympathy for the two people who spent my entire life treating me like a disposable asset. I walked over to the sleek glass coffee table positioned in the center of the living room, directly between my furious father and his weeping son. I reached underneath the table and pulled out a massive 200-page bound document. It was the encrypted forensic audit file I compiled earlier, printed on high-quality paper and organized with meticulous precision. I raised the heavy binder high and slammed it down onto the glass coffee table. The crash echoed through the high ceilings of the penthouse, instantly silencing my father's aggressive ranting. "You want to talk about that second mortgage, Richard?" I asked, my voice cutting through the room with sharp clarity. "You want to boast about hiring defense attorneys using equity from your paid-off home? I suggest you open that folder and read the first page before you write any checks." Richard stared at the thick binder, his bravado faltering under my unyielding stare. With a shaking hand, he reached down and flipped open the heavy black cover. The first page was a high-resolution colored summary of his primary retirement accounts. He blinked, adjusting his glasses, unable to comprehend the bold red numbers staring back at him. "What is this?" he muttered, losing his thunderous edge. "My retirement accounts are completely empty. This has to be a bank error." "It is not an error," I stated coldly, stepping closer to the table. "Flip to the next section." Richard mechanically turned the page. He stared at the official county property records, specifically the home equity line of credit registered against his house 4 months ago. The document showed a maximum draw limit of $150,000 fully depleted. "But I never signed this," Richard whispered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Susan grabbed his arm, peering over his shoulder, her hands flying to mouth in shock. I pointed directly at Trent, who was actively trying to curl himself into a smaller ball on the floor, unable to look his father in the eye. "You did not sign it," I confirmed, ensuring my words landed with maximum impact. "Your golden boy signed it. Trent and Jada stole your email passwords. They intercepted the digital banking documents. They forged your electronic signatures to open that loan. Then they systematically drained your life savings over the last 12 months to fund their luxury lifestyle. Every dollar you spent 40 years saving is gone. Your house is leveraged to the maximum limit, and the bank is going to foreclose when the payments default next month. You are entirely penniless, Richard. You are bankrupt and you are about to be homeless." The realization hit my parents like a speeding freight train. The wall of denial they built around Trent shattered into a million jagged pieces. Susan collapsed onto her knees, letting out an agonizing wail of pure despair as she looked at her son, finally seeing the monster she enabled. Richard stood frozen, the heavy binder slipping from his grasp and hitting the floor. His chest heaved as he stared at the forged signatures, the IP addresses linking the theft to Trent's apartment, and the dates funding Jada's designer wardrobe. The arrogant patriarch who threatened to destroy my life hours ago was reduced to a hollow, broken shell of a man. They sacrificed their daughter to protect their son, and their son rewarded them by stealing their entire future. I stood tall amidst their shattered reality, watching the absolute destruction of their toxic empire unfold in my living room. The absolute silence that followed my devastating revelation was finally broken by the sound of Jada shifting her strategy. Seeing my parents utterly broken, she instantly realized the bank of Richard and Susan was permanently closed. There would be no high-priced defense attorneys, no magical bailouts, and absolutely no final saving grace. Like a desperate cornered rat, she turned viciously on the only target left. She twisted her handcuffed wrists and screamed at Rosa. "It was all him," Jada shrieked, pointing her chin sharply toward her weeping husband. "I did not know anything about the stolen retirement money. Trent handled all the finances. He forced me to go on that stupid trip. He took my phone and forged those electronic signatures himself. I am completely innocent. You have to let me go." Trent jerked his head up, his tear-streaked face twisting into an expression of sheer betrayal. He stared at his wife, the woman he had just committed federal felonies to please. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" Trent yelled, his voice cracking wildly. "You are the one who demanded the Maldives vacation. You are the one who threatened to leave me if I did not buy you that designer car. You sat right next to me on the leather couch and watched me log into their email account. Do not you dare play the victim here. Jada ignored him entirely, looking desperately at the detective and the Child Protective Services agent. He is a liar, she continued screaming, her voice echoing shrilly in the penthouse. He planned the whole thing. He is the one who wanted to dump the kids in the taxi. I begged him not to do it, but he forced me into the car. I am a victim of his financial abuse. You have to believe me, please. The speed at which their toxic, glamorous marriage imploded was genuinely staggering. They were two deeply selfish parasites who had fed off my parents for years, and the moment the host body died, they immediately began cannibalizing each other to survive. Rosa simply shook her head in disgust, completely unmoved by the theatrical betrayal unfolding on my living room floor. You can both save your fabricated stories for the federal prosecutor, Rosa stated firmly, signaling for the uniform officers waiting downstairs to come up and assist with the transport. Your digital footprints tell the actual truth. Realizing his wife had completely abandoned him, and the police were entirely unswayed, Trent turned his desperate, pathetic gaze toward his parents. "Dad, please." Trent begged, his voice reduced to a pathetic whine as he tried to crawl toward Richard. "You have to fix this. Call the local bank. Tell them you authorized the loan. Tell them it was just a verbal agreement. They cannot arrest me if you say you gave me the money." Richard stared down at his son, his face pale and hollow. He could not even speak. The crushing weight of his absolute financial ruin had paralyzed him completely. But Susan, still operating on decades of blind maternal enabling, scrambled to her feet. She looked wildly around the room before her eyes locked onto me. "Madeline." Susan pleaded, her voice trembling violently as she took a hesitant step toward me. "You are a successful accountant. You make incredible money. You live in this massive, expensive penthouse. You can easily fix this entire mess. Please just pay off the $150,000 debt to the bank. Clear the loan and drop these charges so your brother does not go to federal prison. We will pay you back, I promise. Just save our family." I looked down at the woman who had spent my entire existence treating me like a second-class citizen, demanding I sacrifice my own sanity to cover for the very man who just stole her entire future. She was facing absolute bankruptcy, yet her only concern was shielding her golden boy from the consequences of his own criminal greed. My expression remained entirely neutral and calm, my veins filled with absolute ice. "I am not paying a single cent of his debt," I stated, my voice echoing with unyielding finality. "I warned you for years about his financial recklessness, and you called me jealous. You constantly demanded I bend over backward to accommodate his massive entitlement. Well, this is the exact masterpiece you created." I looked directly into my father's defeated eyes, ensuring he heard every single word. "You chose the thief, Richard. You chose to protect him over me today, even when you knew he abandoned his own children on a sidewalk. Now you get to keep him. You get to keep the debt, the bankruptcy, and the utter disgrace. Do not ever contact me again." Two uniformed patrol officers stepped out of the private elevator, joining Rosa in the expansive living room. They hauled Trent and Jada to their feet, completely ignoring their continued screaming and frantic, baseless accusations. My parents stood frozen, weeping silently, as they watched their precious golden child being forcefully dragged out of the penthouse in heavy steel handcuffs, heading straight toward a cold federal holding cell. Rosa gave me a brief, respectful nod before following her officers out the door, leaving Richard and Susan entirely alone in their devastating new reality. I calmly instructed my building security to escort my parents off the premises, watching them walk away with absolutely nothing left in their empty hands. In the peaceful, quiet months that followed that explosive evening, I officially filed for and won full legal custody of Leo and Mia. I completely severed all communication with my toxic parents, letting them deal with their tragic foreclosure alone. Trent and Jada were sentenced to federal prison, their glamorous digital empire permanently erased. I built a thriving, beautiful life in my secure penthouse, raising my niece and nephew in a warm home filled with genuine love, completely victorious, incredibly happy, and forever untouchable. Looking back at the harrowing ordeal, Madeline endured with her brother Trent and her enabling parents, the most profound lesson learned is that shared DNA does not entitle anyone to cross your boundaries, exploit your success, or shatter your peace. For too long, society has pushed the narrative that family is everything and that we must unconditionally forgive our relatives no matter how egregious their offenses. Madeline's story violently shatters that dangerous myth. Her parents demanded blind loyalty to a golden child who was literally stealing their future, expecting Madeline to fall on her sword simply because they shared a bloodline. The critical takeaway here is that enabling toxic behavior never protects the family, it only destroys the people willing to tell the truth. Madeline found her ultimate power, not just in her forensic accounting skills, but in her absolute refusal to be the family's emotional and financial sponge anymore. She taught us that setting a firm boundary is not an act of cruelty. Walking away from deeply toxic relatives is an act of profound self-preservation and undeniable courage. We cannot heal in the environments that actively try to break us, and we are under absolutely no obligation to set ourselves on fire just to keep manipulative people warm. Madeline built a beautiful, secure life by choosing to protect her innocent niece and nephew, proving that true family is defined by genuine love, safety, and respect rather than mere biology. If you have ever felt trapped by the heavy guilt of toxic family expectations, let this be your definitive sign to finally choose your own peace and walk away. Please share this story with someone who needs the courage to stand up for themselves, and let me know in the comments below how you have successfully established boundaries with difficult relatives.